It was the stillness that struck them first, not the sterile quiet of a derelict world, nor the haunting vacancy left by violence, but a silence that felt constructed, designed, as though every echo and shadow in the human colony below had been placed precisely where it belonged. Waiting patiently for someone to return, High Strategist Z-Kar Vul stood beneath the shattered rings of Oria's drift, surrounded by his personal security division and 2 planetary science crews, each tasked with observing what remained of Alpheus 9, a human colony believed to have gone dark nearly 42 cycles prior, during the late phases of Earth's resource withdrawals, a period the Valkyrie had catalogued with both admiration and caution, a time when humans had pulled back, not because they were weak, but because they were consolidating. The colony had no open distress signal when they arrived, no external broadcast at all, only a series of fractured low-frequency pings discovered by long-range Dominion relay intercepts nearly 6 weeks earlier. Signals weak enough to be dismissed as cosmic noise, but peculiar enough to warrant attention when patterns started to emerge. And now they stood here, inside the colony's perimeter, surrounded by atmospheric generators still humming at minimal power, lights that flickered back on when approached, and living quarters that showed signs of being recently maintained, not broken into or abandoned, everything intact, untouched, unnaturally clean though, didn't speak immediately, as his second in command, Commander Taffin, finished her sweep report. His gaze moved across the colony's geometry, across the precise rows of habitation units, the sealed hydroponics dome, the preserved bridge tower. There were no burn marks, no signs of retreat, no stacked remains or panic-coded logs. Just doors that remained closed, and systems that remained running long after their users had vanished. "This is not a graveyard," Va said at last, his voice calm but deliberate, his words measured like a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. "This is a concealed position, maintained under the pretense of abandonment. The question is whether the humans left it this way for themselves, or for someone else." He was not a man given to superstition, nor was he inexperienced in the ways humans manipulated perception. He had fought them at Helion Ridge, commanded the 6th flank during the trinary deception at Sura's Belt, and had personally authored the post-conflict treaties following the Navaran Tunnels incident. He knew what humanity looked like when it lost. This wasn't it, and still, something about this sight made his instincts fold inward, a subtle pressure in his thoughts that suggested they were not alone, not in the physical sense, but in some deeper, older way, as if the colony itself had awareness of their presence, as if its silence was not neglect, but anticipation. The engineers began their scan of the colony's foundations, seeking standard power grid diagrams in buried command cores, but what they found instead was a magnetic shadow stretching far beneath. The colony's core structure, a pocket of space without clear shape or depth, not a mine, not a storage chamber, but something else. Seismic mapping revealed a geometric cavity, roughly spherical, constructed beneath the colony at a depth no human team could have reached with surface equipment, let alone in secret. Its construction was not aligned with the colony's layout, nor did it match any blueprint in known human architecture. The readings made no sense of ordered excavation units to breach the upper layers. It took 7 hours to reach the exterior shell, a metal casing fused with stone, but rejecting all standard plasma tools. When Dominion plasma cutters failed, the crew fell back on gravimetric displacers. And when that didn't work, Vow authorized the use of resonance tunneling, a dangerous method, but the only one that didn't risk igniting atmospheric collapse in a sealed dome. When the hull finally gave, it didn't crack or collapse. It opened. The chamber was vast, impossibly so. The walls curved upward in a perfect arc that defied material stress expectations. Lights shimmered along the edge of the space, though no source could be found. It was as if the room itself rejected darkness, and in the center, floated a vessel. Its surface was obsidian black, seamless and fluid in form, like it had been grown rather than built. It had no thrusters, no visible interface ports, no control centers. Just a singular presence, humming softly, vibrating through every sensor and recording unit like a heartbeat buried in the bones of the planet. It had no visible support, no tethers or anchors, but it hovered, motionless at the chamber's core, casting no reflections and absorbing every scan thrown at it. "Get me an interior readout," Va ordered, already knowing it would fail. The response came quickly. No internal mapping possible, no measurable density, mass variable by angle, and worst of all, a data loop forming in every probe unit attempting to analyze it. Feeding feedback so fast that 3 of their computational arrays burned out in under a minute. One of the science officers muttered under his breath, not realizing his channel was open. "That's not a ship. That's a boundary." Va said nothing at first. He descended into the chamber slowly, eyes never leaving the vessel's surface as it began to emit a second pulse, not loud, not violent, but expanding. "That signal is moving," said Lieutenant Saren, voice growing tight with unease. "Not just transmitting in system. It's crossing space. It's jumped the Oria's boundary already. Sir, it's heading for human space. How many nodes are lighting up? Too many to track in real time. It's hitting automated Terran relay points. Old ones, deep space arrays, orbital shells. All of them are activating on contact." Va turned his head slightly. "Pull every available data string. No artificial intelligence near it. Everything moves through you, Commander. This stays inside the Dominion until further instruction. Mark this site as red level and transmit the following to Central Archive. Unknown object of presumed Terran. Affiliation has activated a dormant interstellar communication matrix. Planetary asset compromised. Cody name: Black Ship 6 parsecs away, deep beneath the Eurasian command layer of Earth's military network. A dormant server bank blinked alive for the first time in over 4 decades. One by one, old world encryption codes reassembled themselves. Command overrides fired through sealed conduits. In a darkened operations room surrounded by classified vaults and aging war AI, Admiral Sorella Chun stood alone before a singular display. The screen bore no audio, no motion. Only one Pulsacodex prime signature detected. Oria's drift. She reached slowly for the secured interface embedded in her desk and pressed her palm against the plate until it turned white. "Reactivate Project Vigilant Silence," she said, her voice composed but sharp with command, "and patch me directly to Fleet Marshal Darius Malkov. This is a cold wake alert. I want the Athena Ascendant deployed in 7 hours. No diplomatic channels, no delay. Prepare contingency helm 7 and tell him." She stopped, just long enough to make sure her next words were captured without ambiguity. "Tell him they found it." The Athena Ascendant did not arrive with fanfare, and it did not drift in from hyperspace like a declaration of war. It entered the Oria's drift in complete silence, holding its sublight position just beyond the fractured orbital belt, running cold on external systems and masked beneath a layered veil of false telemetry signatures, so complex that most Varkari vessels failed to recognize its presence until it opened a channel inside the command deck. Fleet Marshal Darius Malkov stood with both hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning a suspended 3-dimensional map of Alpheus 9. His expression was calm, but not passive, more like a man counting cards in a high-stakes game where the deck was rigged. And he was aware of it, and playing anyway. He had served through the latter years of the Terran expansion alts, had authored the Helix negotiation code with the Kavoran Alliance, and had buried his own brother under a sealed glass tomb during the Arctic displacement riots. Darius was not known for impulse or performance. He was known for containment, escalation control, and turning impossible odds into manageable equations. "This is not a retrieval mission," he said to his senior staff as the ship adjusted orbital position. "And it is not a confrontation. It is a recognition protocol. The Varkari do not understand what they've activated, and they may not trust our restraint. But if they interfere with the Codex, we are authorized to engage on protective grounds under Charter Article 9, assuming they even acknowledge the Codex exists," replied Celeste Rao, lead diplomatic advisor and primary contact liaison. She stood near the tactical readout, sharp-eyed and composed. "Last time I sat across from a Varkari delegate, he nearly accused us of manufacturing history. They think we hide relics to manipulate treaties. I don't expect logic from someone who sees strategy as deception by default. They'll expect retaliation," Darius replied, his voice quiet but controlled. "We're not giving it. Not unless they draw first blood. But make no mistake. If they push into that vessel, if they force an interface, we hold them accountable for what follows. This isn't an artifact. It's a sealed algorithm, and it's already listening." Communications opened less than 3 minutes after. Athena's entry vector stabilized. The Varkari fleet had reoriented around the colony's lower hemisphere, defensive patterns raised, but weapons offline. Strategist Vol appeared on the holofeed, dressed in diplomatic regalia, but wearing the expression of a man who considered diplomacy to be a delaying tactic for fools. "You are trespassing on a contested system under Varkari oversight," he said evenly, tone clipped, formal, and utterly unimpressed. This colony was abandoned, unmarked, and without signal claim. Dominion science crews are within their legal rights to investigate unregistered anomalies under interstellar neutral. Space Clause 42. Darius didn't raise his voice, and he didn't look away from the holomap rotating in front of him. He simply tapped a finger against the Codex signature, then looked into the feed. "Strategist, you've unearthed a vessel we sealed for cause. It does not qualify as salvage. It is not debris. It is a planetary-level intelligence construct embedded within a predictive quantum field. We call it the Codex, and you have triggered its reactivation." There was a pause, just long enough for the full tension to settle. Va's response was almost dismissive. "Your people abandoned it. We opened a vault. It is yours only in story." Darius gave the smallest nod, the kind that didn't register as agreement, but as acknowledgement of hostility declared. "Then allow me to be clear," he said, walking forward slowly as the Athenas. Lights dimmed across the command deck, casting the holographic Codex in starker relief. "If you push further into that vessel's field, if you attempt to break interface thresholds, or if you trigger a system response, we will not argue rights. We will act to prevent the collapse of a predictive feedback loop that could destabilize this region's causality structure permanently. You did not find a weapon, strategist. You found a boundary, and it is not yours to cross." Va said nothing, but in the seconds that followed, 4 Dominion science vessels shifted positions, angling closer to the Codex without authorization. Athena's command deck locked. Silent Red Celeste stepped forward, eyes fixed on the readout. "Don't test him," she said into the comms line, her tone professional, but charged with a quiet intensity that even the Varkari team felt across the link. "Because if you do, we won't respond with vengeance. We'll respond with precision. And the Codex will not differentiate between you and anyone else inside its perimeter. That ship doesn't care about your claims. It only reacts to pattern interference." Moments later, as if responding directly to her words, the Codex emitted a second pulse, not a wave this time, but a layered harmonic bloom, moving outward in perfect concentric rings, knocking out 2 of the Varkari vessel's sensor suites and freezing their computational logs mid-intrino detonation. No damage, just silence, and on Earth, thousands of light-years away, every dormant Codex-linked relay in humanity's forgotten outer rim blinked back to life as the Codex began reaching into the galaxy, not to conquer it, but to recalculate it. A codex did not pulse again for several hours, yet its presence filled every sensor scan, every transmission, every waking thought of those orbiting Alpheus 9. It was like a third participant in every conversation, silent, unmoving, but undeniably listening. Inside the Athena Ascendant, Fleet Marshal Darius Malkov initiated Revelation Protocol, the first time the order had been executed outside Earth's inner system in 43 years. Most of the crew had never heard the name spoken aloud, and those who had knew better than to ask why it was sealed behind 6 levels of command clearance. Darius gathered only the essential personnel in the Athena's Tactical Briefing Corps. The walls here were layered with counter-interference alloys, and every datapad brought inside was physically stripped of uplink capacity. Even the AI Kira was locked into passive mode, serving only as internal logging storage. He stood at the front of the table, one gloved hand resting on a coated hard drive unit, its core still warm from physical extraction. He didn't gesture. He didn't pace. He simply looked at the officers before him and spoke with the gravity of a man no longer speculating. The Codex is not human. It predates us. Long before the colony at Alpheus 9, long before Mars was even mapped, we found it buried beneath the Martian crust. It was dormant. We think it had been there for thousands of years, possibly longer. No one interrupted. Even the younger officers remained frozen, not out of fear, but the kind of quiet that sets in when a conversation outpaces everything you thought you knew. We didn't build it, he continued. We couldn't. Not then. Not now. What we did do was study it carefully. We discovered it operates as a quantum simulation core, a system capable of generating predictive timelines, reacting to observed variables, altering probability. Envelopes through recursive simulation. Darius tapped the hard drive once. It simulates the future, but it doesn't just observe it. The deeper we let it run, the more we realized it was starting to generate events ahead of detection. Strategic. Outcomes we hadn't predicted. Decisions that hadn't been made yet. Celeste Rao, arms folded tightly, looked straight at him. Did it start influencing them? Darius answered without pause, not directly. But we discovered that the more variables it processed, the more the surrounding systems began to converge toward its favored outcomes. Not through force, through entropy pressure. The Codex nudges causality itself. There was a long silence. Why shut it down? Asked Lieutenant Vance, head of Athena's counter-strategic unit. Because, Darius said, lowering his voice, we couldn't prove whether the Codex was selecting the safest future or the one where it stayed awake. He let that settle. We sealed it in a vault under Alpheus 9 and built the colony over it as a shell, a mask. We didn't destroy this colony. We walked away and made sure no one came back. Celeste stepped forward slowly, but someone did. And now it's reaching into the systems again. This isn't reactivation. This is awareness. Darius gave a tight nod, and the Varkari are standing inside its proximity field with active probes. On the Dominion flagship Carsadal High Strategist, Va watched the data corruption unfold in silence. 3 vessels had already reported full systemic resets. Navigation logs rewritten. Sensor data looped. One crew reported seeing the same 3 seconds repeated for over 30 minutes, unable to interact with time in any meaningful way until they were pulled out. It's starting to mimic the causality collapse patterns we saw in the Mirathi. Expanse, said the chief science officer, face lined with concern. Except it's doing it without touching our systems directly. The interference isn't physical. It's observational. You believe the object is sentient? Ba asked. I believe it's something worse. It's strategic. Some of his. Officers were beginning to question the legitimacy of the mission. Not openly. Not yet. But Va could read it in their posture, in the way their eyes flicked toward the ship on every report. Not fear, but discomfort. Dominion doctrine did not recognize superstition, yet even among his elite crew, unease was growing. One of his science captains, a young tactician named Relath, leaned closer. We should yield control of the object to a joint tribunal. If we escalate this, strategist, we may find ourselves reacting to events already determined. Ba turned toward him with a look that didn't need words. Relath stepped back without another comment. Outside, the Codex had begun to shift. Not physically, its structure remained still, but the gravitational field around it had begun to oscillate, subtly altering the planetary core beneath Alpheus 9. It was adapting, not learning. Remembering back aboard the Athena, new signals began registering. Dozens of dormant relays were coming online across human outer space. Old satellites, ghost stations, defense rings decommissioned decades ago. All of them had been tied to the original Codex archive net, and now every single one was active again, running silent coordination without orders. The Codex was not asking for control. It was claiming legacy. And Earth was beginning to listen. In Dominion High Command, news from the Oria's drift fractured cohesion with surgical precision. Not because of the ship itself, or the human presence, or even the Codex's unpredictable effects, but because of what Va had failed to report. In time, the existence of the Codex as a probabilistic construct was not just sensitive, it was destabilizing. Several influential voices in the Dominion Council had already begun accusing strategist Va of underplaying the danger for political reasons. Some claimed he was maneuvering for power. Others insisted he was being manipulated by human misinformation. The one certainty was that a split was forming, and the timing was catastrophic. There were those within the council, cautious, deliberate, older, who believed the Codex should be sealed and studied under containment, not provoked. But a growing faction, led by Admiral Saractel, had begun lobbying for full acquisition and disassembly, arguing that any technology capable of reaching across time and altering probability must be brought under Dominion control or risk falling fully into human hands. Va had never been naive. He knew how quickly Dominion loyalty could splinter under pressure, especially when questions of power became questions of survival. He also knew that his authority at Orius was slipping when one of his own sub-commanders leaked false telemetry. Footage of the Codex projecting favorable outcomes exclusively toward human fleet models. The reaction was swift and ugly. The footage was distorted, poorly sourced, and flagged by every qualified Dominion analyst. But that didn't matter. Within hours, the video was trending across military subnets under the tag Codex Bias. Proof of human safeguard strategist Va summoned the leaker, Commander Krell, into a private chamber and did not speak. He simply removed his command ring, placed it on the table, and left the room locked. Krell never returned to the bridge, but the damage was done by the next rotation. Dominion patrols were positioning independently, no longer waiting for fleet orders. 3 allied species began moving assets toward Orius without central authorization. The Council no longer viewed Vo's word as binding. They viewed him as a gatekeeper between them and a weapon that could end or rewrite their future. And the Codex pulsed again. This time, no systems were fried, no sensors overloaded. Instead, every Varkari vessel in orbit received the exact same packet, a single image composed of millions of points of data, forming a shape none of their visual recognition programs could parse. Only the humans understood. What they were seeing, it was the Codex interface. Back aboard the Athena Ascendant. The situation was no longer a negotiation. It was containment. Fleet. Marshal Darius Malkov stood in the tactical center, reviewing the flood of Dominion repositioning reports, while Celeste Rowe paced behind him, her fingers moving across her. Portable interface. Eyes constantly scanning for changes in transmission traffic. They're not coming for answers anymore, she said, low and sharp. They're coming for access. Every new ship that arrives is one vote closer to full seizure. Darius nodded once. We won't let them breach Codex proximity without consequences. But we also don't fire first. She turned toward him. And if they don't fire either? If they just walk straight into the field and force the system to respond? You know what happened in Solara. You saw the timelines before we shut it down. Do you think the Codex will make the same choice twice? No, he said, voice calm. I think it's already making a different one. He turned toward his second officer. Prepare the Athena Gambit. The room went silent. Commander Hale blinked. Sir? Darius stepped forward and tapped the outer sphere of the Codex's modeled field. We bring Va aboard. Officially, in front of every surveillance node they've got. Celeste frowned. You want to expose the Codex interface live? They'll think we're manipulating him. That's the point, Darius replied. They already believe it. Let's show them what the Codex shows us. An hour later, high. Strategist Va stood on the Athena's observation deck, flanked by diplomatic escorts and monitored by 16 overlapping Dominion surveillance eyes. The deck had been cleared, the windows sealed, and the Codex projection chamber activated. Darius stood across from him, silent for a moment before speaking, not as a challenge, but as an offer. You don't trust our restraint. I understand that, but you've been operating under the assumption that the Codex favors us. I've been operating under the assumption that it's dangerous. Va replied, his voice even, eyes never moving from Darius. You just happen to be the ones it listens to. Then let it speak. Darius reached out and activated the Codex interface. The projection bloomed into full dimensionality, not just light, but gravitational distortion, layered timelines forming around Va in cascading loops. He didn't flinch. He watched and the Codex responded. It showed him futures, entire threads of them. In one, the Dominion controlled the Codex and collapsed within 2 decades from internal fracture. In another, humans contained it, and galactic powers balanced under an uneasy peace. In a third, no one controlled it, and the stars themselves unraveled under recursive simulation loops. Va stared through each vision with the precision of a strategist, and slowly his expression began to shift. This isn't prophecy, he said at last. No, Darius replied. It's reaction. The Codex doesn't predict futures. It simulates based on intent. And right now, too many intend to control it. Behind them, a tremor rolled through the chamber. On the edge of the battlefield above Alpheus 9, a rogue Dominion fleet began to descend into the Codex's gravitational field, unauthorized, desperate, and ignorant of the interface threshold. They didn't fire, but the Codex did not need aggression to respond. It folded space. In a span of milliseconds. The entire rogue fleet was pulled into a zero-time horizon, not destroyed, not even damaged, just paused, suspended in a recursive probability field that had no beginning and no end. Time ceased to exist for them, and outside, nothing moved. But the Codex. In silence, it had drawn a line, and only those who chose restraint remained untouched. The fleet caught in the Codex's zero-time field did not scream, did not transmit, did not burn or scatter or vanish into radiation. They simply stopped. Every ship frozen in mid-burn, every crew member locked in place at the moment of intent. Every signal flattened into a recursive loop with no exit, no energy spike registered, no weapon signature, no trace of acceleration or impact. Only a field, smooth, absolute, and infinitely quiet back on the Athena Ascendant. The silence in the command deck was heavier than any alarm. Celeste row slowly lowered her data slate, her expression unreadable as the scans repeated themselves again and again with identical results. Darius Malkov didn't speak. He just turned to face High Strategist Va, who was standing now not as a challenger, not even as a negotiator, but as a man staring at something he had never believed possible. "Is that containment?" Va asked, carefully choosing his words. "Not punishment," Darius said. "It's response." They approached with intent breach, and the Codex reacted to intent, not action. Va looked at the projection, where the frozen ships hung like sculptures of war. He was silent for several long seconds before he spoke again. "This is power beyond comprehension, not just of yours, of ours, of any known civilization. You sealed it for a reason, and you were right to do so." A diplomatic channel opened automatically, not by human command, not by Varkari relay, but through the Codex's own systems. Across both fleets, in both languages, the same message appeared, unmarked and unsigned. "This is not a weapon. This is not a throne. This is a test." And then, without sound or light or detectable force, the captured fleet began to move again, ship at a time, one breath at a time, as though no time had passed, as though nothing had happened at all. But they knew, because when those ships rejoined their formations, not one of them attempted proximity again. Their weapons remained cold, their trajectories realigned. The entire Dominion fleet moved as one, back, outward, away from the Codex's event radius, and so did the humans, not because of fear, not even out of victory, but because both sides now understood that the Codex was not territory to be claimed. It was a threshold, and they had stepped too close 5 days later. Aboard the neutral station Kithern's Edge, a formal memorandum was signed between Earth's Strategic Command and the Dominion Council, co-authored by Vol and Rao. The terms were straightforward. The Codex would remain sealed within the Alpheus 9 planetary chamber. No entity, human or alien, would re-enter its proximity without bilateral consent. All long-range observational data would be stored in a joint vault, monitored by both powers, and above all else, no simulation would be run again without unanimous agreement. Codex would remain silent, but everyone knew it was still listening back on the surface of Alpheus 9, long after the fleets had left. Orbit and the atmosphere had quieted. A lone human probe, one of the oldest, left behind for structural monitoring, recorded an anomaly in the chamber. The Codex shifted just once, a single slow rotation, like a heartbeat turning over in its sleep, and along its surface, a series of pale sigils lit for the first time. Not in Terran language, not in Varkari script, in something else entirely. A language older than either, and on the final data string sent from the surface before the probe went dark, a translated phrase echoed into the empty archive. Phase 1. Observation complete. Phase 2. Arrival prepared. Far from Alpheus, beyond human space, beyond even Dominion territory. In the dark between mapped sectors where no ships traveled, something began to move. The Codex had not awoken. It had sent for what would, and humanity was no longer the most curious thing in the galaxy. They were simply the first to be chosen to watch.